Temptation is a part of life, especially for us humans. And that song we just sang, how many times did we hear for us? But as we learn today, even Jesus had to contend with temptation in his earthly life. He endured many temptations while he was with us in the form of a human, such as his conflict with the authorities, having to face the cross, and maybe even feelings of frustration or possibly disappointment that he might have felt while teaching the disciples who were so slow to comprehend his words. One wonders, why? Why would Jesus have let the Spirit lead him out to the wilderness and then be tempted by the devil? Especially knowing that Jesus would resist the devil's tempting, or anyone else who would have tried to tempt him during his earthly life. So that is the question of the hour. This was Jesus' way to be truly, truly with us, among us, and to get in touch with the feelings that we experience as humans. In Hebrews we hear, Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being made in the likeness of men. I qualify that with humanity. And that Christ is subject to every human experience from birth to death. God wasn't content with creating us and overseeing us. God needed a much more intimate relationship with us. And it would be through the incarnation, Jesus Christ. That would attain for God this intimate relationship that God sought. Baptism and temptation both happen in the wilderness. Isn't that interesting? Think of the times and places where we often seek and find God in our lives. When we are hungry, like Jesus was, when we are lost, when we've experienced loss, when we doubt or question. All of these are wilderness experiences. These are the times we often turn to God or some other form of a small g God, a quick fix, that we think will help us and give us what we are needing in that moment. So sometimes we seek to renew our baptismal covenant with God, and then other times we find that we are susceptible to temptation. These are the moments in our lives when we cannot rely on ourselves only. We must look for something outside of ourselves to help us. It is the wilderness in our lives which turn us toward God or away from God. In our story today, the Spirit of God leads Jesus to the desert wilderness. Why would Jesus allow this? Because he must face the devil. And this is the only way that this confrontation can take place. And it must take place when Jesus is at his most vulnerable. Jesus is sinless. Jesus is not one to create a situation in his life where he might find himself dealing with the devil. Of course, we humans are fairly good at finding ourselves in these situations where temptations exist, and they can follow us around. So Jesus must be led by the Spirit in order to have this confrontation. And Jesus just happens to be in a vulnerable moment after his baptism. He is hungry and he is exhausted. We are also hungry, but we are also wanting power in our lives, or protection, or certainty or stability or something, maybe even material goods. They all make us vulnerable to the devil and to temptation. Let's talk about the devil. Now, the question is, do you believe in the devil? Is the devil real? This is a conversation that I've had with some of you. I believe it is up to the person to form their opinion on this. I'm not going to tell them what to believe, but I will tell them what I believe and how I then choose to live my life with that belief. I don't know if the devil exists. Maybe, maybe not. Or maybe only for the message in this story today. But what I do know is that evil does exist. And evil has power. I've not seen the devil, but I've seen evil. I know that there are aspects of the devil or some form of evil working in our lives when temptations, subtle to overt, come our way. I know that sometimes the ability to avoid these temptations is worn down in us and almost non-existent when we must face them. I have compassion for myself and all of you. Knowing this, I see in this world the wilderness that exists in all of us. Of course, it varies greatly from person to person, but it is powerful. And no good comes from seeking power and material goods. No good comes from evil thoughts or lack of compassion or empathy. No good comes from looking for certainty or belonging in all of the wrong places. No good comes from letting power or position go to our heads. No good comes from a worldview where we put ourselves at the center. Is this evil? Not necessarily, but it can become evil quite quickly. It is a slippery slope when these things become the small g God, when we are seeking something to fill our emptiness, our longing, whatever it is that we're feeling. I just don't acknowledge the devil in my life. If I don't give the devil space, then the devil does not exist for me. I am saved from the devil by not giving the devil space. And I could freely live my life with God without the devil present. Yet, temptations do exist for us all. And then evil is a whole other issue for us. It does exist because humans succumb to temptations, particularly those temptations that are no good for us. Whether we believe the devil is real or not, evil is real, and evil still has power in our world. That is why we need God. Simple as that. That's why we need God. A God who is willing to get in touch with what we feel, especially in those times of wilderness. A God who is willing to help us out of the wilderness when we stumble into it or when it is placed upon us. What we learn from Jesus in this passage is that every time the devil tries to turn Jesus inward by trying to manipulate Jesus into his own self-serving concerns and doubts, Jesus turns outward to God, to God's words, and to God's position. And with anything and everything that the devil attempts to do, God's loyalty to creation as well as Jesus' loyalty to God, shines through. For Jesus, it is God, and for us, it must be, it has to be the one true God, because we can be fooled so easily. If it is the one true God, this is where evil can be decimated, because the power lies with God, not with evil. This is all good for us to remember, because sometimes the power we think evil has might just overwhelm us. To defeat evil is to turn to God. I know we encourage turning to God at all times, not just now or during Lent or having read this passage. And somehow we know this, but can forget it quickly in times of crisis, in times of loss, in times of emptiness. Jesus shows us that remembering to turn to God is not an easy task. It's not a cakewalk, but there is a solution here in this story today, even for us humans who find it so hard. I love the fact in this story that the devil up and leaves as soon as he sees he has lost the confrontation with Jesus. What a weak being. Just up and leaves. And let's not forget that when the devil left, I have a very important statement that I just skipped right over. So, Jesus has this confrontation, the devil leaves. Just up and leaves. Evil will go its way equally well if we confront evil equally well. Let's not forget that when the devil left, the angels came and waited on Jesus. Isn't that lovely? God never left Jesus' side. God's community never left Jesus' side. Jesus is surrounded by God and God's community, and we also are surrounded by God and God's community. Working to dispel the power of evil in our lives results in all good things: safety, being protected, caring, and a loving place we all get to experience. We get to experience it fully. And guess what? Bottom line, that's God. Amen.